You're listening to BQN. Assimilate the audio.
Hi, I'm Davey.
And I'm Mitch.
And we are
the Bargain Bin Gamers.
Oh, you feel awkward?
Oh my god, not yet.
Oh my god, we are insufferable today. But hey, there's a whole bit that we're going to do here.
I was going to say like that's different, but go on.
I've got things to say. This is the podcast YouTube show and Twitch stream where we play the cheapest and not always shittest games out there.
So you don't have to.
But hopefully we find a few
gems along the way.
Hidden gems along the way.
Hidden gems.
We've got a hidden gem today.
Yeah, it's definitely a hidden gem, but it's a gem for sure.
It is a gem. Mm-hmm. It's a diamond in the rough.
Aladdin,
if you will. God. But before we get on to that, I just want to give a big shout out to all of our BQN podcast network patrons, especially to this show's associate producer,
John.
Is there John? Sam Johnson.
Sam Johnson. I love you, Sam, and I love your work, by the way.
Thanks for watching, Sam. Thank you, Sam, and all of our network patrons for your continued financial contributions towards the network. You'll never hear an ad on any of our programs. And if you would like to help keep this and other BQN programs coming to you every single week, head over to patreon.com/BQ.
You can subscribe for as little as $1 a month.
A little $1 a month. $1 USD.
USD, my deep school. True. All of our conversion rates.
To maybe $3 AUD at this rate, you know.
With the rate we're going.
Exactly. Yeah. There's a tariff on our podcast. No. Let's not talk about that show. No, edit that out. So, what have we been playing?
We have been playing Queer Quest.
Queer Quest.
Point and click, queer community-based game, which I personally think has got some quality charm to it and has like an art style that I really speak to. I'm dressed for the occasion, just in case.
You speak to the art style.
It resonates with me.
You mean it speaks to you?
I don't know if games should be talking to me, but yeah.
But that sounds like something Lupe would say in the game.
Where's my weed? But I think because it has such character and class, it's really resonated with me. What about you, Davey?
Yeah, it's super cute. And I grew up a lot earlier in history than you did. I grew up in the 90s when point and click adventure games were really quite just sorry, that muesli bar I ate before is really stuck in my throat.
Gagging on it.
But yeah, no, I grew up playing like a lot of point and click, like the old like Mist and Riven or Broken Sword, which were my favorite ones, which you have no idea what that is, do you?
No.
But that's fine. So this kind of takes me back to that, especially because there's a little bit of the what do I click on next?
Where am I going?
Yeah, clicking around the screen to find out what to do. But we have a little bit of gameplay footage of us playing the game like we normally do. We played the game before doing the pod today because we've got a little special treat. But patrons, you can see our very unhinged gameplay footage over on the Patreon app or heading to patreon.com/BQN. But instead of like diving deep into our thoughts on the game, what have we got in store for everyone?
We've got an extra special little treat. We have QueerMo Games developer, icon, legend, and star, some could say. Those being me, Mo.
Hey, Mo, how are you?
Hey, doing well. How are you?
Pretty good. We're good. Did you like that intro? Icons?
Yeah, that was lovely. Yeah, I had no idea I had such a reputation.
Yes, you have a reputation that has just started, and we're ready to keep it proceeding with us at least. So
I appreciate it. Got to start somewhere.
Yeah. So we're assuming though, QueerMo Games is you. Yeah. You are QueerMo.
Yeah, I'm not very creative in naming companies, but I needed an LLC to publish the game the like adult way. So
Fair enough.
QueerMo Games.
Yeah, and QueerMo Games was born.
Yes.
So, quick question though: is Queer Quest an entirely solo effort on your part? Have you had a lot of help with it?
I've had a lot of help. It's like my child project. It is my project and my vision, my design, game design, puzzles, all that. But I hired for the artwork, I hired for the music and some advertising, probably something else in there. But All the coding, all the writing, that stuff was all me.
Amazing. Yeah. The music's really cool, and I'll get to that in a sec. But I guess for our listeners and viewers who haven't seen or heard of the game, can you give us a bit of a rundown on what QueerQuest is and a little bit about the journey to bring it to market?
Yeah, the elevator pitch that I usually throw with QueerQuest is that it's a gay Monkey Island meets a feminist Leisure Suit Larry. So if you grew up playing those, it hits right if you played exactly those games at exactly the right time.
Yeah.
But basically, it's like a narrative-driven adventure about queer community, explores queer grief, friendships, all that sort of stuff. It's very campy. It's very punk rock. It's just sort of a goofy indie explosion, a very slow explosion. It took a long time to make, but yeah.
I love the Leisure Suit Larry reference. Are you aware of what Leisure Suit Larry is?
I'm not. I know Monkey Island. I know that reference, but no Leisure Suit, unfortunately.
I'm glad you didn't make me do what I had to do playing Leisure Suit Larry when I was a kid, which was on my neighbor's computer. And I would sit there trying, you've got to do the little quiz at the beginning so the game can know if you're old enough to play or not.
I wouldn't have passed, but
Tell us a little bit about the actual journey to develop the game. If you kind of did it all yourself, how long did it take? What was the inspiration behind? I mean, you mentioned a little bit of the inspiration behind it, but what made you kind of want to bring this game out?
Yeah, it was, I would say, a couple different little seeds that over time grew into me making this game. The seed that got me thinking, oh, I want to make a game. Oh gosh, years and years ago, there was a protest in Portland, Oregon, where the game takes place, where I used to live, where a queer couple was assaulted. And so the community got together and held hands over a bridge. And I was 17, 18 or something. And I was like, this is a silly protest. Now I don't think that. But, me back then trying to discover what protest looks like to me, I was like, we're all just holding hands. This doesn't do anything. I'll make a video game. I'll show them what real protest is. And it took me 8 years. I didn't show anyone anything. I learned a lot along the way. Yeah, right? I don't know, why other people who have feelings have to be the enemy in that of I can protest better. That was, I grew a lot over making this game. But that was sort of the queer games could be a step in creating greater change in the world was the good thought behind that. And I remember I was living in New York as a barista and I made latte art of video game characters. And I was like, how do I get a grown up job? How do I stop being a barista? How do I stop making coffee? And one day I was staring at I think it was a Katamari Damacy latte that I just made. And I was like, oh, what if I learn to make video games instead of video game latte art? Maybe that's my step out. And I found a book by Anna Anthropy about rise of the video game zinester. And it was a lot about twine and how to make smaller games, which I didn't pay attention to that lesson of make smaller games. I was like, I'm going to go make a big game immediately.
Yeah.
It's still turned into a smaller game, but it feels like a big game. Yeah, and that helped sort of push my trajectory. And then through just sort of life unfolding, I ended up getting an internship at a tech company. And that's where I learned programming. That's where I learned the skills and got money to pay other people who had the skills that I don't have, like art and music. And so, but because it was all out of my paycheck, it was a very, very slow, I can pay you for 10 hours a month of work, So it was a really long process, but it let me and everyone else that worked on it be really intentional about what we did and gave us, the space to backtrack and redo things. And I think because it took so long, the game is exactly what I wanted it to be, which is really cool. But also I feel like it's 5 years later than I wanted it to be.
Yeah. And, we all know the pain of having to get an adult job to do the things that we actually want to
Unfortunate,
do.
But,
yeah.
But you mentioned something really nice about that, where the game is set in Oregon. Is that where you're located as well?
Yeah, I'm in LA now, but normally I was in Portland until very recently.
Yeah. So I wanted to know a little bit about, with QueerQuest, were some of the characters or the places visited, were they inspired by real places that you know or real people that you know? Or did you kind of make some of that up?
A lot of it's real. Cup and Dyke is what we used to call Cup and Saucer, this like brunch place where they're just always lesbians. It was just like that place.
Yeah.
Scum Room is a joke on the Scum Engine, but also on Florida Room, which is a dive bar that was super queer, is super queer up there. And like has that sign that you see when you load in. There's like a big vintage sign outside, and that's the same sign as the real bar. The Bluffs, the park where you go to watch the sunset, is a real place where everyone would go gather and watch the sunset. So cute.
Where the sun is always setting continually.
Yeah, literally. Yeah, and the people, most of the people are either friends or combos of friends. Unfortunately, since I started the game in my 20s, it's a lot of people I'm not friends with anymore, which is kind of weird. And some friends who have passed away, which is like a sweet way to memorialize forever them, make them forever.
Yeah.
But also is weird because how do you write dialogue for a dead friend like that? There are a lot of ups and downs in making authentic characters or capturing authentic people for this game. Luckily, no one that's in the game has been like, hey, you did this wrong. Like I shared it with most of those people during those times to be like, is this, accurate enough? And someone would be like, that's not my horoscope sign or whatever. And we workshop
Very important part.
Yeah. But yeah, like the Australian character Kiri, based on real person, real name, they, them pronouns. I was like, hey, Kiri, what would your puzzle in the game be? And they were like, well, I wouldn't know whose house I left my shirt at. And I was like, that's an amazing video game puzzle. Like easily made that in. Some friends I would be like, oh, pretend you're at a bar. What would you say at a bar? And they would text me the response and I'd use that dialogue because I can only write so many people. That's kind of, it helped to have a community or in order to represent a community.
And I think when you're representing the queer community as well and trying to reflect real people, it's so important that be as authentic as possible, even when you're coming from the queer community yourself. But I guess what about Lupe? Is Lupe you or is Lupe someone else?
Lupe is a combo of people. I'm Bo in that game. Bo is me in my 20s.
Right.
To a T.
Okay. Quality character writing, by the way.
Yeah. Side note, somewhere in my 20s, I dated someone for like 2 weeks. They ghosted me, whatever. Before they ghosted me, they only called me Bo, and I never corrected them. And that's how I became Bo in the video game.
Oh, right. That's so funny. Just always stoned on the couch.
Yeah. But for Lupe is a combo of two people. One of them is named Lupe. And I was like, hey, Lupe, can I put you, can you be Lupe in this game? And they were like, yeah. And I tried to make some small things different from that Lupe so that they wouldn't be like, oh, Mo's being weird and putting me as the main character of this game and we don't even talk that much. So like real Lupe loves cats. Video game Lupe is allergic to cats. I tried to do like little things like that. Yeah. They're also a combo of another friend who I literally never told inspired this game. I haven't spoken to her in a long time. We just moved away. It just happens. She knows about the game, but I don't think she was like, oh wow, that character, the original character sketches looked a lot more like her.
Yeah.
But I just like the iconic, just like, do y'all use the phrase like bridge and tunnel? Just like someone that lives on the outskirts of the city and like takes the bus in to party and like is just sort of like I want to say normal, but kind of like a normal gay, I guess. Just like a not any sort of like wild, flashy character, just like kind of a boring gay person because they do exist.
Sure. Yeah. It's my life's mission to become one.
But yeah, I thought that would be like a more relatable main character of just like someone that just looks like you'd see them at the divey gay bar, in the background or something. Like I don't know.
And it's an interesting story as well so we've got Lupe who is just wakes up hungover on the front lawn. Mitch immediately resonated with that.
The way that I related with Lupe pretty much immediately. I was like, can I have some food? I've been looking at the stars and I want some weed.
and can someone else do it for me?
Someone do it for me. You do it because you love me, right?
Yeah. But I mean, then it kind of gets, shit gets real and Lupe's partner Alexis gets kidnapped. We're assumed kidnapped. There's a truck that takes it off. So what inspired the story behind it, right? I mean, obviously you wanted to make a bit of a mystery game, But I think I kind of feel like there's some important themes underneath it as well. Like there's the no, don't contact the police and all that kind of thing. So Lupe goes out on the mission to do the investigation by themselves. So yeah, how did the story come together?
Yeah, that part was a little bit of like me leaning on video game stereotypes. Princess Peach gets kidnapped, all these video, like Monkey Island, Blaine gets kidnapped. Like it's just very common. What I didn't realize was that when queer people play video games, they take the plot so seriously. They were like, they got kidnapped. Oh shit, what happened? Like, and I was like, I don't think anyone said, oh shit, Princess Peach got kidnapped.
We were like, why are we walking around doing these, like finding a t-shirt? Our girlfriend's been abducted.
Yeah, I've gotten a lot of that feedback of like everyone being like, why are they acting normal? And I'm like, shock. It's
going to orgies and the like. Yeah.
Good that our priorities really sorted on that one. Yeah.
Yeah, I was hoping for refrigerator logic where people wouldn't be like, what? This is what I would do instead. And I had some friends who were like, well, like this could be a whole platform for talking about missing Indigenous women. And I was like, that's a really big thing that I don't feel qualified to take on, but I also don't want to, disrespect that is going on in this game. And like, so I'm constantly balancing the like, here's real shit, and also it's a game and we're still playing make-believe, and it's more here for the humor as a vehicle for exploring stuff.
There's an expectation, though, if you're a queer developer making a game filled with queer representation, that you must have lots of deep meaning about the queer experience in the game.
I mean, there is pressure not to mess it up, because I think that queer people are our biggest critics of queer art, Like, I was super careful to do a bunch of interviews before writing dialogue with, like, talking to trans women and being like, how do you want to be represented? What's some representation that you do like? What are some mistakes? And doing that with lots of different intersections of queer and identity. And basically what I learned is that there's a Bechdel test for everyone. So like I think it's like called the topside test or something for trans folks, where it's like two trans people not talking about being trans, or, things like that.
Yeah.
Just to make realistic characters at the end of the day, which was helpful and good to like see healthy patterns that I can follow. But yeah, I was terrified. I think that's a huge part of why it took a long time to release this game. I left Portland before I released this game because I was like, what if people in Portland get mad at me for something? I'm just, it's a vulnerable thing to put kind of my opinions of people out there and stuff like that, and poke a little bit of fun at queer stereotypes. But I don't know. I think you can tell it's made with a good heart.
Yeah,
definitely.
It's charming is probably the word I would choose in terms of like when I played it, like even when we turned it on before, and Mitch had watched a lot of gameplay footage, but he hadn't kind of really interacted with it before, and he was just like, "Oh, this is just so cute."
It's so cute, and you really mentioned something that's kind of resonated with me there, where it's like I wanted to represent like the boring queer experience, because I think a lot of the time queer experience can sometimes be really saturated in like going out, being full of partying energy, but this is just such like a small scale, like it's a community, we're just talking about a missing person. How did you find like going against the grain in that regard? I know you said it's kind of based on like a real person and real experiences, but was there like any kind of like stop gates where you were like, oh no, I need to make sure that I'm keeping true and I'm not going into those like queer stereotypes?
I feel like because I based it on real people, it was easy to avoid stereotypes, except for when people are stereotypical.
Yeah.
I did feel like once the game was done, I was like, oh no, I forgot to include fairies. I forgot to include this like weird genre of queer that might not, there's just so many chapters of gay to fit into one space. I did as much as I could, but afterwards I was like, oh no, here's like my clear blind spots kind of stepping in.
Yeah. And did making your own game like this allow you to kind of bring light to a lot of those different communities and bring light to your own experience? Like, was it almost like a cathartic process, like making this game, being able to kind of put pen to paper, or?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. This game was like my purpose for a very long time, where I was like, the Kickstarter happened in like 2016 when like American politics, shockingly, were like having a rough moment.
Something different?
Yeah, switching it up a little.
Yeah.
And it was sort of like, okay, like things are uncertain right now, and the thing that I know how to do is how to make this queer game so that this can exist and, in that cheesy way, inspire someone else or create that comfort of queer community for people, or just do something that helps move the needle in the direction I want to be moving it in. So it felt like my activism. It felt like my project. Now I don't know what to do. Another story.
Sequel.
I think there's such a shared experience amongst queer communities around the world. Though when I first played it, I did a stream of it on our YouTube page, and I remember just like referencing different things. And I kept saying, "Oh, this feels like it could be Fitzroy," which is a very grungy suburb here in Melbourne, Australia, where we are, which is incredibly queer, incredibly diverse, and I could almost every character in your 2011 Pittsburgh that you've got in Queer Quest, I feel like I know those people.
Yeah, there were characters where we were meeting them. We were like, oh, we know exactly these people. But he's right. The suburb that we're thinking of is very diverse. It's very like grungy and edgy and kind of cool. So is that like, was that a perfect representation or almost like a time capsule of the area you were growing up with at that time? Or did it evolve as you went over the 8 years? Because I guess people change and like the place changes, but was it kind of like a stamp of 2011 that they reference in the game?
Yeah.
2011, yeah.
I would say it is a pretty good stamp. I will say that it's Portland, Oregon, which is the whitest city in the States. So I bent the rules a little there.
Yeah.
Of just like proportion of diversity in that city. But that's the only thing that I really took creative license on. Otherwise, like, it is Portland. Those people are all still based on real people. I feel like it will still feel accurate in the future too. It's weird because like working on something for so long that it becomes a past piece, and then being like, oh, this is actually solid representation of the past, even though that wasn't my intention. Like having a flip phone and stuff. Like, I was like one of the last of my friends to have a flip phone, but I sure had one that year. Like, so like that crossover. I don't know. It's weird. It's weird building a time capsule.
Yeah. And because it's been out for a bit now, so what has the reaction from your player community been like? Because it's got a bit of a following. I found out about it because it was shortlisted in the Melbourne Queer Gaming Festival. I don't know if you knew that you were shortlisted in that, but you were. And that was how it came across me, and it was getting a lot of love in that forum. But I was wondering what other feedback you've received, like good, bad, ugly.
Yeah, it hasn't gotten a lot. I mean, it's gotten some feedback. I was hoping that it would be more popular, but that's obviously I'm going to want my game to be more popular. I felt like releasing in Pride last year was a chaotic time to release a game. There's just Pride, everyone's coming up with something. The people who played it and who get it love it, and they get it. I found out that it was in the Queer Melbourne Games Festival because I have a Google alert for the game's name that popped up and I was like, oh, this is so sweet. Like I wasn't expecting it, was really excited. That felt really reaffirming to like be found and seen in that way. Pre-pandemic, I would take the game to conferences and watch people play like the first couple puzzles, and it would be so cool to see people be like, oh, you're making a game about my life. I'm just making nachos and smoking weed and trying to organize the DVD discs to play the right game, which is quickly becoming an outdated problem. But
I felt that pain. I've why is it in this one? You've literally gone for every DVD or game container. Have you received has anyone given you any feedback that's kind of been helpful in terms of improving the game, or that you might sort of take in when you develop other games?
Yeah, I definitely need to fix bugs. I released the game and was like, oh, I'm done. And then people would be like, oh, this doesn't work. And I'm like, well, just don't do that. Which isn't the right response, isn't being a responsible developer. I'm finding some balance now in like fixing things and trying not to break other things. But I absolutely broke the itch build, but I will fix it and figure it out. So I fixed all the other bugs until now, so I could do it again.
I was going to say, it's a bit like a domino thing. You fix one thing and then that kind of like, or butterfly effect, that breaks something on the other side of the code.
Yeah, and the game isn't that big, so I don't know how like AAA companies release games that don't have bugs. Like it's it seems impossible.
Well, these days, do they? I feel like every AAA game I have, they have a day one patch. So
Yeah, there's always a review 12 months later. Now that they've fixed it, what
It's
do
great.
we think?
That's a good point.
So for yourself as a queer game developer, with this game, is there some like tips and tricks and skills that you've learned that you're going to take into maybe your next project? Because you mentioned at the start, like obviously you can't do everything. You can't design like the art or the music, so outsourcing. But is there any like more technical pieces or like writing pieces that you're going to use?
What have I learned? I've learned a lot about team management and project management that I never
Love it.
wanted to know. I didn't learn enough about releasing and marketing. That's still my weakness and like something that you have to start at conception of the game. And it's more of a practice than anything, I feel like. I don't know. I've toyed around with starting a new project and I tried a different tool and it was just so weird to use a different program entirely. And I was like, this is the more ethical one that I should move to. And also, it would take me another year to learn it in a way where I would be like quick enough to make something.
Just to expand on one of the first things you said, I know you said that you outsourced the art to someone. How did you figure out the art style of this game? Because to me, I think it's like a really pretty game. It's very charming. It's very cute. Did you have that idea to start with, or did you go through a couple of different options?
Yeah, it's had like 5 artists and animators on it, partly because they have different skills and stuff. For the first couple of years, I worked with my buddy Hagen, and he was the primary artist. He does very like lowbrow style art. So the initial concept art is super trippy. You would have no idea what to click on because everything is like neon colored. And I was kind of like, well, let's like tone it down a little bit and sort of look at, like Tank Girl and the Gorillas and like look to inspiration there. So it's sort of a combination of this person's art and like that style of like comic art.
Mm.
But then when they got a grown-up job and stopped doing art for the game and I hired other artists, we're all from the same video game community. So they were like, "Oh, we'll draw like Hagen draws." And I was like, "No, we don't have to do like quite like that. We can do some of that, but like the walls can have straight lines. The people can be like wacky and curvy, but like it doesn't have to look like we're on acid." So it's like trying to find that fine line of like punk rock, but still, bright colors and visibility. So it's not too hard to actually play a point and click adventure because, yeah, pixel hunting is a real issue.
Yeah, I bet. What about the music you mentioned before as well? Is because I love the music, by the way. Like I just each little bit from like the I love the song that plays in Bo's house in particular. It's just so appropriate.
Yeah.
But is it all different artists, or did you have one music team? How did that come together?
The music is all by Mar del Castillo. They're in a band called Miss Honey. They did all of the music. I would like for Bo's scene, I was like, hey, make a song where it's a lot of different words for weed, because if you listen really closely, you can hear like them saying different words for weed. And the inspiration from that was this game, The Neverhood, which was a claymation 90s point and click adventure game that had a song about coffee where they just go like Java, mocha. They just name different coffees. And I was like, I want this to be the inspiration for the weed song.
I can see it now, yeah.
Yeah. And the coffee shop, I was like, okay, something Magnetic Fields inspired and things like that. And sometimes they would just, have a song. I just described the scene and they would write a song and we'd go back and forth until we'd figure it out. But yeah, they're a really talented musician.
And I mean, you do weave a lot of, you talk about the journey, right? So you weave a lot of very relatable queer experiences into it, from the quirky brunch spot to, I loved the scene in the bar where you had to try and clear all the straight people out. But then you've also got you've got the Pride Parade, the orgy, even and like the humor behind selecting who has to be in the circle jerk and who has to sit next to each other. I was interested to know, though, was there any ideas or like mini games or anything like that you wanted to include that you had to leave out, or did anything like any of those experiences radically change as your 10-year development process went along?
Yeah, I will say one puzzle that got cut, and I also had to change the ending, but the puzzle that I originally cut because I was like, oh, like I shouldn't do this, was making the play party a femme-only party and having Lupe femme it up in order, and then exploring what does that mean to be femme. And then, ironically, years later, I was excluded from a party for not being femme enough, and I was like, oh, I should have made that a puzzle.
Save it for the sequel.
Yeah. It's like, this is flattering and also insulting at the same time. I don't know how to deal with that. And then the ending I had to change somewhere around 2018, I want to say. I won't say what the new ending is, but the old ending, it was like a lot of punk-aligned characters causing chaos to bring community together. And during that era, politically in the States, that made it look like I was blaming Antifa, which was not what I wanted to do.
Okay.
But like the timing of everything and the relevance, I was like, oh, I need to change this ending because this like has aged poorly and it's not even done. And I switched it, and I think it is a much more timeless, still gay villain. So not calling punks villains, but just
yeah. I know what you mean, but I think when you're developing a creative piece of work like this, or a narrative or a story, you've got to kind of go with your gut, right? I know I've written stuff before where I've just been like, oh, I don't think I have the right to tell this story. I can see it being picked up in a particular way. Something you said there, and I've been dying to ask this since you mentioned the 10-year development cycle, because I was unaware of that coming into this interview with you. How did you keep yourself motivated over 10 years to because like I mentioned, like I do a lot of writing, but I've got so many half-finished novels and first drafts. I've never finished one of them because it takes a long time. How did you kind of keep your eye on the prize over 10 years?
Yeah, I think one thing that really kept me on it was paying other people to work on it out of my pocket.
Yeah.
I was just like, well, sunken cost fallacy. I'm already this far. They, expect maybe for this game to finish one day. So that was a big motivator. I also just went in and out of it a lot. I would do 30 hours in a week, and then I would touch it maybe twice in a month or something, depending where my mental health was or where my job was or anything. So it was, I at one point tried to like track my hours to be a responsible person, and that lasted for maybe a year and is like absolutely useless data because I have no other time to compare it to. So yeah, I managed to keep on it, but I have no idea how consistent I really was. But it sounds like I was consistent, but then you play it and it's like a fully polished team that's doing this full time could finish making this game in a year. It wouldn't normally take as long as it took me, but I was also learning the entire time. So it took as much time as it needed to take.
Yeah. Well, it's impressive with all that time taken and the different people that you had rolling in and rolling off it, that what has come out at the end of that 10 years is a very consistent and polished experience that has I would say quite a clear like creative direction behind it. Yeah. It doesn't feel like you're playing something that was kind of patched together across different groups of people over the years, because you could imagine that could happen.
Yeah. Was that a consistent like voice that was constantly ran through like every different department? Obviously, it's a bit of you called it like your baby, and it was obviously quite a passion project. Was that like a clear through line? Like everyone was married at that point where it's like, this is the story we're telling? Or did you kind of have to nip people back closer to that line?
Yeah. No one else had any say creatively at the end of the day. I let them,
way on the highway. It was
sometimes there'd be some creativity in like what a character looks like or what a scene looks like, but I was like, these are the puzzles, these are like the entrances, here's the people that are going to be in this scene, here's pictures of what that scene looks like, here's an MS Paint drawing of stick figures in this scene. So like a lot of it was laid out for them, and then they didn't really get to see how it all came together until the end, because I was like so perfectionist, like, like this is my project, my precious, kind of like a little obsessive, like it was my vision. So like I did need other people's feedback. Playtesting is important. Like it would not be the game it is without other people's input, but I tried so hard not to have other people's input at the same time. So it's a very weird balance. But yeah, as far as like consistency in art, one of the artists focused on backgrounds and polishing a lot of them to look consistent towards the end. And another one was like focused on animations and stuff. So like each artist and animator was different, but I would put them on one set thing to make that set thing cohesive.
Yeah, and it's something I wanted to pick your brain on as well. Now, it was interesting coming into this and talking to you and hearing like, yeah, just making a fun queer adventure game, and the literally the kidnapping of Alexis was just an allegory for Princess Peach and all that kind of stuff. But one thing Mitch and I have found since started doing this podcast, right? So we started as like playing like cheap games and trying to find queer representation in games. We always had like a section called Make It Gay when we would review a game. But then we actually found that queer representation in games is thriving in the indie community. I was wondering, like, why do you think that is? Like, why are we finding so much like more authentic representation and creatives in this small indie scene as opposed to some of the more, I don't want to say tokenistic, but sometimes disingenuous kind of representations we get in mainstream AAA gaming?
Yeah, I think more queer people have access to making games than they used to. Like using Twine, or all of the tools are becoming more available, more affordable. There's more ways to learn how to use the tools out there. So as a result, like the games that are coming out are indie games because that's who wants to make these stories and like who can get that approved. Like I tried to get a publisher for QueerQuest and like no one responded to my emails. They were like, why would they? It has nudity, it has drugs, it isn't a mainstream story, so it's not something that's easily monetized. So queer games live in the indie scene because monetization doesn't have to hit as big of a goal, if any, sometimes. One of the reasons why I called the game QueerQuest is because I wanted to go to Steam and type in queer and see a game. And I started this game before anything would pop up. Now the irony is you can type queer and see QueerQuest, but your adult filters have to be on. Or off or whatever because it's adult content, which like there is nudity, there is drugs. The people who would be upset by that are louder than the people who want it. I understand that that's how Steam does it, but also like there's no penetration. This game isn't like violent. This game isn't like anything that wild. It has like boobs and butts. Like I think it doesn't deserve to be totally hidden from more than half of the users.
Yeah,
Everyone
that's
got
my
them.
yeah, everyone's got it.
Yeah.
And you're right though about being like to be able to find queer gaming content is a little bit of a mission. So when we set out to try and find more queer games to play or games with queer characters, you would often just get very traditional, the same kind of top 10 lists of like Life is Strange and all that kind of stuff, which are great games in their own right.
Yeah.
But we wanted to find more interesting things. And that was how I came across the Melbourne Queer Gaming Festival and other bits and pieces. And then, you start to, you have to kind of almost go underground a little bit to find games like QueerQuest and some of the other ones we played like Nocturnals and all that. So I think it's really great that you can now do that. You can type in queer and, oh my God, a game with queer actually comes up.
And it's unabashedly queer as well, which I think is really important. Obviously, there's the adult content, XYZ, but I think it's a game that will resonate with lots of people, especially like moving forward into this brave new age that we're going into.
And besides, I mean, you go into a quiet room to play Dream Daddy, so you're fine with all the adult content.
I don't mind. In fact, I kind of don't mind a little bit of more adult content in some of those games, to be honest. So that was actually, we were talking about the indie scene. You mentioned that it's a bit easier because there's a lot more queer voices in the indie scene. What have you learned from developing around that community that you want to take into potentially like a new project? Like, is it just to be open to new voices and make sure you're experiencing everyone? Or is it like a technical thing you might have learned while kind of sharing that space?
I think the next game I work on, I would do a rough full outline of before bringing other people in. I think because I kind of built this linear game in a linear fashion with other people, it made it slower instead of if I like proofed it out and then had people come in and be like, oh, okay, I can see how these pieces connect. I think that would have made things a lot faster. Yeah. As far as queer representation, I don't know. I like making queer games. I'm not sick of it yet. I know it can be like a trope to make only gay stuff, but like whatever, it's fun. It doesn't bug me. I don't know why people are mad about gay games being a thing. It's just play something else. you know?
100% there. It's
What was that review that we saw on the page?
no, it wasn't on the itch page. It's
Oh.
something I think you quite cheekily put on your own website,
Yeah.
where it was sort of, I don't have posters of vaginas on my wall, so I guess this is for someone else.
That was so funny.
Yeah.
Loved that.
That was a queer person in a Discord where I was like, "Hey, I'm looking for playtesters," and this person was like, "Oh, like I think they like work at Valve. Or they work somewhere in games." And they're like, "Yeah, I can playtest." And they wrote like all of this feedback that they thought was being so helpful, and it was just them like missing joke after joke, and just like they were like, "Lupe was really mean to Alexis," and like they just like the tone didn't hit, and I was like, "Oh, I can't. This I know you're queer, but this game isn't for you." And that
Yeah.
happens sometimes. Like that also happened with that scene in the bar with all the straight people. When I was doing the Kickstarter, I did like a article at Huffington Post about the game, and I was like, "Yeah, you're trying to get the breeders out of the bar." And they posted that, and I got in trouble on like Facebook or something for using the word breeders, and I was like, "Oh, do I have to adjust my language, or are these, do I not have to adjust my language?" It was like that crossroad of like I want to be inclusive, and also I don't always want to censor myself even when it's like tricky language. Because, a lot of queer people were like, "Hey, I'm mad about this because it's transphobic," or "I'm mad about this because XYZ." And then someone else was like, "Well, I don't like the word queer." And I was like, "Well, I definitely can't help you."
Oh no!
Can't fix that one.
Wow.
Yeah. So for a while, I changed it. So they were, instead of being called breeders, they were called humdrums. And then a few years in, I was like, we'll just have a choice. You can pick which to call them.
Hmm.
And it doesn't have to be on me. It's the user's choice now. And that was kind of my, I don't know, evolution on that topic.
And it's so funny listening to all of this and just realizing, like, as much as you can try to do something to support our community, like, it can also, I mean, we are a diverse dichotomy all onto ourselves as well, and you're not going to be able to make everyone happy. And I mean, props to you for making such a concerted effort to walk that fine line and to not offend people and to try and make something that was accessible and representative of as much of this community as it could possibly be.
Yeah.
But I think it does a wonderful job of providing this little snapshot into a particular part of the queer experience as well, right? Like where we live here in Melbourne, like we probably live in kind of white gay hell. But like, you know what I mean? But like, do you know what I mean? And I can imagine some of the people we know playing this game and going, "What is this?" Right?
Yeah.
Like, so
It's definitely interesting because there's definitely, you mentioned it's not for everyone. Some people don't get it and some people do. The people that do get it are either the people that are represented or the people that know those people really well. And I might not be perfectly represented in this game, but by God, do I know so many people that remind me of Lupe and Bo. So that's what I think brings the charm to it. And you mentioned it at the start, queer people are the biggest critics. We're not a monolith. You can't please everyone. So it's good that you did manage to walk that fine line and you did tweak the ending and things like that. So, you made concerted effort. So
watch me edit out me calling our home suburb white gay hell. Because half of South Yarra comes for me. So Mo, what have you got in the pipeline now? I know you're making tweaks to Queer Quest here and there and fixing bugs, but have you got any other games on the go, or what's next for QueerMo Games?
Prototyped with the help of other people again a game a couple of years ago called Bottoms Up, and I took some time off of Queer Quest. I took like 6 or 7 months off of Queer Quest to like prototype this game. Got money from Google to pay other people to help prototype it, and I want to pick it back up and explore it more. And it's Bottoms Up historic gay bar tycoon game where you can learn queer history by living it. The real challenge in that is being historically accurate when, the queer experience is so vast. So like 1920s, white gay men in America versus, 1920s, black gay men in America. Like it's just everything was so different in each place. So I'm trying to figure out which timelines to focus on and maybe do 3 timelines and have an easy, medium, hard mode or something. But it's also just so much research. And because of the political era, I'm more nervous about spending a lot of my paycheck paying other people right now when I don't, job security is a big scary thing for people. And so I'm definitely trying to figure out what an outline for this would look like before I feel confident, bringing people in and doing the whole thing again, because it was also a lot of work and very exhausting. But it's such an important topic. I think the game is really fun. That the prototype has been floating around for years and has so many views and thumbs up and stuff. So I know it's on the right track. It's just dusting it off and figuring out what the next step for that is. But I think that's the next project that I'm gonna properly tackle.
And is that on your itch page? Can people grab that?
That's on itch. You can play it on Android because it was part of a Google scholarship thing. It's originally for Android, but I don't even think it's in the Play Store anymore. But it's Windows, Mac. There might be a browser version. I think there's a browser version. This shows how much I've played it lately. There should be a browser version if I didn't do that. But yeah, it's on queermogames.itch.io.
Well, yeah, we'll include links to your itch and also to QueerQuest on Steam in the show notes.
Yeah.
So QueerQuest is in Australian dollars on Steam is $20, or you've got the suggested $20 pay what you like model on itch, because that was the case when I bought it. Is that still the case?
Yeah, that's still the case. I love that itch has different pay models, but itch doesn't reach as many people as Steam. So itch is the place to get it if you just want to play it. Steam is the place where to get it if you want to throw money at me. That's kind of the difference. Or if you need to have it in your Steam library for organization purposes or whatever.
Great. And how can people keep up to date with how things are progressing? I know you're on socials. Where can they follow you? You mentioned a Discord server as well.
Oh, I just lurk in Discord servers.
Okay, yeah.
Same. Sound like me, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm pretty mediocre at being reachable. I am on Instagram. That's kind of your best bet. QueerMo Games on Instagram. I would also just probably follow the itch page if you have an itch account. That's kind of where I will post a weird small game if I do a game jam or something, or if and when the next project comes out, that's where it will be.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Well, congratulations on QueerQuest. It's a great game. We highly recommend our listeners and viewers to go out and support amazing queer creatives like the wonderful Mo here. And you'll see a lot more of this coming up on the show soon as well. So Mo, thank you so much for your time today.
Yeah, thank you, Davey and Mitch. This has been so fun. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
We enjoyed you as well.
Well, I loved that.
Oh my God, wasn't that great?
I know. You were so nervous coming into your first proper interview, by the way.
I know, but Mo was so sweet and gentle with me, which was very nice of them for my first time.
I know. You forgot that we actually sat across the room from real people for your first interview with the Melbourne Gamers. But...
Sorry, Jacob Warren. Forgot your name.
Jacob Warren. We see them all the time.
Best friends.
Yeah, I will reiterate. Yeah, go and check out QueerQuest and
100%.
Do a bit of deep dive research and find more of these queer creatives.
Yeah.
I'm going to do some sharing of some of the lists from the Melbourne Queer Gaming Festival. And that's actually some of the content we've got coming up is really working through that list that came out last year from that festival, because there was a lot of really cool stuff in there. And we've got some really, really cool content coming up as well. So our next episode, we are going to be interviewing Ray White. So Ray I found on itch as well. So Ray lives in Brisbane.
Mm-hmm.
Ray developed a very short, it's like an Atari 2600 type game on it called Queer Picnic. It's literally you just go on a picnic.
It's queer something.
Yeah. You go to the shops, you buy some orange juice, you go to the picnic. It's great.
Course, yeah.
But I've got Ray's website open here. So Ray is also a poet, a writer, and a zinester as well. I've been interacting with Ray on Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
They seem lovely. Can't wait to meet them virtually, as much as I'd love to go to Brisbane.
Get some sun.
We've also here in Melbourne as well, coming up after that, we have got Dr. Xavier Ho.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Xavier is an award-winning queer researcher, artist, designer, and curator focusing on the queer independent games community as part of his work at Monash University here in Melbourne. So we're going to be in person in the studio with Xavier, which is really cool.
So excited.
And the other thing we've got coming up in April is we will be chatting to a Twitch streamer who I love, who I know in person from a trip to the US many, many years ago. Hey Girl is his name and has I just want to talk to just a gay man who has literally makes a career and a living out of streaming on Twitch, because I find that so fascinating.
Goals.
And I'm just jealous more than anything else. Let's be real. So check that out. Make sure you check out the Patreon, patreon.com/BQN. Mitch and I are putting lots of cool bonus content up there. Plus, if you're across the other shows on the network, mainly the Star Trek content, it's a lot of Star Trek content. You can also find my new Warp Speed reviews.
Of course they can.
So anyway, until next time, I've been Davey.
And I've been Mitch.
And we are
the Bargain Bin Gamers.
If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you give it a big thumbs up on YouTube or follow the podcast wherever you get your podcast from and leave us a 5-star review. Be sure to follow us on Instagram and Blue Sky and follow along on our live Twitch streams. You can also continue the conversation in our BQN podcast Discord by clicking the link in the episode description. Don't forget that the Bargain Bin Gamer is part of a larger network of podcasts called the BQN. You can support this and other BQN programs by becoming a patron over at patreon.com/BQN. We'd love to hear your feedback on the episode. Leave us a comment on YouTube or send us an email to bargainbingamer, GAYMER, @gmail.com. Until next time, au revoir.
Double T Media.